Hi, and welcome to the Raw Heart and Soul podcast. Today I have with me Jack Nagle. Hi, Jack.
Hey, how you going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Really good. It's Friday, which is exciting.
It is exciting. Yes, football on the weekend. Do you follow football?
Mad football person. So my team, the Tigers, are playing tonight, so I'll be watching.
My husband is the Tigers. I'm the Doggies.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's funny, right? Because we sucked for so long. So my childhood is remembering going to the MCG and getting smashed.
Yeah.
But now I forget because we've been good for like 4 years.
Yes.
Everyone hates us, you know?
Yes. And that's the point, because you get a bit smug. And this is what I was saying to Andrew, because we went and watched the match together and side by side.
Yeah.
And my kids are all, my three three children are Bulldogs. So we sat in the fan club supporter section, in the cheer squad. And so Andrew's sitting here and there's like dotted other Richmond fans around, and halftime I'm all happy and excited, and he's sitting there just like a Cheshire cat, just sitting. He's just saying, just wait. And then at the end of that third quarter, I was like, yeah, I don't want to sit next to you anymore. Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you was because I heard you on my friend Paul Taylor's podcast a few months ago, and was very interested in not just what's your background, which we'll go through, but also what you're doing now in terms of rehabilitation and coming at that from a not so normal perspective.
Yeah.
But let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
Let me ask this question a different way. Do you remember the first time you used drugs?
I do.
And why?
Because my friends were doing it. So yeah, for me, like it was a big time, like social pressure. So I actually, well, not social pressure, but wanting to kind of be a part of the group. So my first drug was actually cannabis. I don't think it was alcohol. I think alcohol came after. And that was purely because I went to school in Murrumbina in Victoria, and I was living somewhere else at the time. I went back to my mate's house that went to that school. This was when we were still in primary school, I think, and hung out.
That's young.
I know. Well, I kind of forget. Maybe it was a little bit after like year 7. I can't quite remember. Somewhere there, like 12, 13. And yeah, his older brother was smoking pot, and they'd all been like having some joints and stuff. So I went and did it. And the thing that kind of makes me laugh is that I was always growing up like a super sweet kid and like super scared of like doing the wrong thing and all those sorts of things. So I remember being absolutely terrified when I did it. I thought we were going to get caught. Yes. I was freaking out, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, we smoked pot. It was on Easter Monday, and yeah, behind Chadstone at the skate park there. And then but the reoccurring theme for me with any drugs that I took was I was always worried and scared about it when I first took it, but as soon as I did it, I just fucking loved it. Sorry, I hope I can swear.
You're allowed to swear. Yep.
Yeah, I just loved it, and I was like a duck to water, and then I would kind of escalate it from there. So yeah.
Like I said, that to me that seems young, but I know that doesn't seem young to a lot of parents who have got children who have gone through this.
Yeah.
Do you think that you just said that you want to be part of the crowd and you wanted to be like you were scared of doing the wrong thing? Do you think that you were scared of doing the wrong thing around your friends if you didn't do it?
Yeah, 100%. Like I wanted to be. This is all in hindsight, but it's kind of what I've learned about inverted commas like addiction and the process out of that and stuff. But I always had this like desperate need to be accepted, be liked. And I was when I look back on it, I was quite insecure as a kid, even though I was kind of naturally popular, kind of participated in sports, all that sort of stuff. You wouldn't have known it, but I can always remember as a kid being anxious about, fitting in, being liked, being popular, and being part of the crowd. I was quite a sheep. I was quite a follower, back then. So yeah, for me, it was about fitting in and staying okay with my mates and not wanting them to think that, I wasn't cool or I was uncool or anything like that. So yeah, it wasn't so much about the drugs.
So you started with weed, but then you went on to alcohol?
Yeah, then I went on to alcohol, which kind of happened not long after that. I think probably like at local footy, like watching seniors and stuff like that with mates. And again, same thing. I was really kind of nervous to have it. Wasn't 18, all that sort of stuff. But as soon as I had it, like I was literally a fall down drunk from the first time that I drank it. We're at the footy and I made an absolute mess of myself. I got in trouble and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, felt like shit. Drank like, 6-7 beers that first time, threw up everywhere, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that has kind of definitely been my story, is that once I did something, I was all in.
When did you move? Like, so you went from weed to alcohol, and like, is there a point that you get to drinking alcohol where it's not enough?
Yeah, 100%. So I think what happened for me was, again, it was around like my social group. So that was like kind of the first time that I started doing it. And then like so I come from a sporting background. I played basketball when I was younger, like semi-competitive. It's embarrassing saying that I was good when I was young or whatever, because hey, there was heaps of people. But I guess you could say like how I was going, I didn't quite hit that age where I was getting to that professional mark, but I definitely had all the opportunities, and it was at my feet to have a run at that kind of a life if I wanted to. So that was like pretty intense and happening all the time. So that kind of kept me with some good structure to start with. So I wasn't using flat out all the time, but whenever I got the opportunity, I was doing it. And a lot of my mates were smoking weed consistently, starting to muck around with like taking ecstasy and MDMA and magic mushrooms and just like party stuff. And that was kind of where I went next. And as soon as I sort of did that, on top of like the smoking weed when I was out with them and stuff like that, yeah, that's sort of when I just got really interested in drugs. Like I remember the first time I had ecstasy, it just like, it was at my, it was at a year 10 formal. I don't even know why we had year 10 formals. I don't even think that's a thing, but it was then.
Yeah, we did.
And yeah, that just like, yeah, I can remember it. It just like blew me away big time, even though I was consistently smoking pot and stuff. And then that got me interested in like trying other things. And it was a bit of the case of like adventure and excitement and fun and stuff when I started mixing with those different crowds. Yeah, like I just started getting introduced to different drugs and different people from different backgrounds and all that sort of stuff. And it just kind of opened up my world. And yeah, things kind of took off from there.
So from a parent's perspective, and we just talked about this, I have 6 children. You're about to have your first baby.
Yeah.
I go through, how did your parents not see this? But then I also go, actually, how did you hide this from your parents? Because it's not always like, I wanted to go as a parent, I think I should know that that's happening to my child.
Yeah. So I was always the kid. As I said, it was kind of weird, and I don't know how I like pushed myself, but I remember feeling scared a lot when I would do things for the first time or the first couple of times. But I was like a super nice kid. So like I like had a double life. Like you never would have thought that I was the kid doing that stuff. I was quite secretive and deceptive when I think about it. And mum says that to me as well. But, I was super polite, like, would always go in and talk to people's parents, all that sort of stuff. I wasn't like you wouldn't like look at me and think like, oh, he's a bit of a trouble. Yeah, that's right. You'd think I was the opposite. So I think that kind of held me in good stead for a while. And also because, I had all the stuff going on with sport and things, my parents just kind of thought, oh, well, we're just dropping him off to a mate's house. He's just, and because they didn't know, because to start with, I was doing it all while they went around. And when they would see me, I was just kind of hungover, or I would come in at nighttime, or coming down, and you can kind of hide it. So yeah, that I think that's why they never knew until it got down the track and it was a bit more serious. Yeah.
So tell us about that.
So what happened for me was, so by the time I got to like 17, that was sort of first like defining moment with the addictive patterns and the drug use. Like I was using definitely pot, amphetamines, other drugs, like pretty consistently. And like the wheels were starting to fall off a little bit, and I was dependent, and I didn't even really know that I was dependent. But we went over to America, like Andrew Gaze was my basketball coach. We went over to America to like start off that initial process of like playing some tournaments.
College basketball.
Yeah, like getting looked at by like high schools, maybe some college scouts and stuff like that. Went over there, went over there for a month, didn't use anything on the 14-hour flight to LA, and felt terrible and had my first like kind of detox experience.
Cold turkey.
But it's not even just the physical stuff, I guess. If you take drugs enough, it changes your perception of yourself and the rest of the world and how you're thinking. So I guess like what I kind of found important had started to shift. The way I was thinking was different. And yeah, I just like wasn't getting enjoyment out of what I was doing with the sporting stuff. Like I wanted to just go and be a normal teenager. I wanted to go and party, all that sort of stuff. I was also playing like crap. So I was getting benched a lot. I wasn't having much fun, all that sort of stuff. And then pretty much when I came back from that trip, I just said to all my coaches and my parents and all that stuff, nah, don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm giving up, which was like out of the blue to them, and completely different. And I remember having my coaches ring me and tell me what's going on. But I just had in my head, I didn't have in my head, like no one starts off going like, I want to be an ice addict.
No.
But I had in my head that I was going to go and party and just have fun. And that's kind of what I did. And a part of me, which I've come to realize, which is not the whole story behind addiction, but definitely like with sport, anything that I do that I enjoy, like I give it a crack, like I go all in. I'm obsessive. I'm a bit compulsive, all that sort of stuff. And that sort of came out in the drug use as well. Like it was like I'd been like held back like a dog on a chain.
You just want to be let loose.
I just wanted to be let loose. And that's sort of what happened. And it was just like a bit of a perfect storm. I obviously had some, like, as I said before, like, which I didn't know about, like some insecurity, emotional issues, like, all that sort of stuff going on as well. And it all just kind of mixed together. And I just found myself like trying different drugs. And at this time though, right, things were kind of going a bit wrong, but I was having the time of my life. Like,
so you didn't see that happening?
No. Like I knew that I was like going out and partying and kind of being extreme, but at that stage, it was super fun. And I literally was having a blast. I still look back on it and think, fuck, that was pretty fun. Like I was kind of going nuts, even though we weren't going out and hanging out at pubs and clubs and stuff like that. It wasn't like that kind of partying. It was at people's house, doing drugs, all that sort of stuff. But it was a great time. And I think that's an important message to like get out there to people that, a lot of people forget about. The reason why people do drugs and alcohol and do them again and again and again is because it feels fucking good. Like it's an amazing experience. You just can't deny it. That's why people do it. So, but with that, I started meeting new people, different crowds. People were doing drugs kind of in different ways, the way that I wanted to do them, and it was just that slippery slope. So flash forward to kind of 19, 20. And like I was running a full-time methamphetamine habit. I'd progressed into like using intravenously, so like shooting up and injecting. And it was far beyond fun. I was like so super miserable, had all the like stereotypical stuff going on where I was like in psychosis, had tried to commit suicide a couple of times. Were
you still living at home, Jack?
Nah, mum. So I have a younger brother who is 8 years younger than me. So when I was 18, 19, he was like 10, 11 when all this was kind of going on and pretty mad. And mum just kind of came to the decision that like, and I remember her saying to me, like, I love you, but we just can't keep like living like this. I've got to keep your brother safe. Because obviously like.
He's a minor. You're now an adult.
That's right. And I was out of my mind, like bringing people home, randoms, like scumbags, stuff like that. Just dangerous stuff, stealing all their shit and selling it and all that sort of jazz. So I was pretty out of control. So she made the decision to ask me to leave. I was kind of like couch surfing at mates' houses, like in and out of dad sometimes. Like, so it was just like, I wouldn't say that I was homeless, but technically on the stats, they probably would have like classified me as homeless. But I was just like out sleeping on people's couches and stuff like that, just using drugs basically.
Where do you get the money for it, Jack?
Good question. So for me, that was kind of,
because it's a habit. Like that's an expensive habit you've got.
100%. Like, so when I was 18, My mum was worried about me. She tried to get me a job. She thought, oh, if I try and get him a job. She didn't know that I was using ice, but maybe that'll like help him to get him around some blokes. So I got this carpet laying job, right? It was the best thing that happened to me. It was the worst thing that happened to me. I got around like a group of guys that were like kind of knock around blokes, but were like good dudes. And that was the best thing. So I got like some good like male influence and role models that taught me how to kind of be a better person, all that sort of stuff. That was awesome. And I really needed that and wanted that at the time. But the worst thing that happened was that I was getting paid $2,000 a week, right? Cash.
Right.
Because I was off my chops on speed and meth, and I would stay up all night. I was working 2 jobs. I'd work from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, have an hour's break. I remember sculling a couple cans of alcohol. I'd be off my face on meth. And then I would go and work this other job at Parliament House in Victoria until 2 in the morning, go home, use some more, stay awake, do it all again the next day. And yeah, I was just like racking up cash, but it was like this snowball that was just going wrong. Obviously, I was like spending most of that money on drugs and stuff like that. And my habit was just increasing, but I was becoming more and more unmanageable. And things just started to go wrong. I ended up getting fired on my doorstep one morning. So all of a sudden, I was like left with this massive drug habit that I was like fueling with all this cash to get, you know, that, and I just didn't have income anymore. And that's where things kind of started to get bad for me. So the worst times in my life have actually not been when I've had too many drugs. It's been when I've had not enough. Because like, particularly with ice, what goes up must come down. So you go up incredibly high, but you come down pretty low. So if you don't have any more to kind of keep you at a sustainable level, incredibly depressed, it's where like the suicide stuff come in. I was crossing every moral boundary because I'd become desperate to get drugs, stealing shit off my parents, all that sort of stuff. I was never like a tough guy, but you know, I started like taking risks, which was like terrifying me. And that was like a turning point for me. I'd stolen like quite a bit of money off a dealer. And I was fucking shit scared
of the dealer.
Yeah. And just the consequences. And, you know, at that time, like, I don't know, like, yeah, I was kind of around bad people. You know, there was crazy stuff kind of happening. And it was just this mad sort of life. And I spent all of that money in like a week. It was about $7,000, which was like heaps for me at the time. And I spent all that money on drugs in like a week, went completely bonkers. All this psycho stuff happened. And I woke up at the end of all of that. I got dropped at a milk bar, and I remember like going into the milk bar trying to buy this Big M, and I didn't even have like $5 in my pocket to buy the Big M. And I don't know, there was just like something about that moment that just like sort of hit me. And I just felt miserable, and I was like, yeah, I was done. I'd had enough. So do
you think that was your rock bottom?
One of, you know, so I don't think like people, that's what I've come to learn. Like people don't have a rock bottom, they have multiple rock bottoms, and those like low rock bottom moments, all they do is provide you with an opportunity out of like a bitter, cold, hard slap to the face, an opportunity to like reassess your life and go, shit, things aren't right, and give you a window of opportunity. And that's like what one of those times were for me. But I'd had many other like serious stuff, like overdosing, ending up in hospital, like with like being revived with catheters, you know, like they were rock bottoms and stuff like that. But that never stopped me using drugs. You know, I kept going. So yeah, and this one time happened. I got on the train, went back to mum's. At that time I was kicked out. She let me in, which was different. But I remember like she was so pissed off at me, and she didn't even like look at me. And I was fucked. Like I kind of wanted her to like give me a hug or whatever. And then I went into the bathroom, and I looked. She had this like big mirror in her bathroom. Sounds super cliche, but it's 100% what happened. I looked. Yeah. I looked into the mirror, and like my life kind of like flashed before my eyes. It was weird. And I like saw this like, from what I was, this happy-go-lucky guy with like heaps of opportunities and good things.
And good friends
on the horizon, you know, all this stuff, to like really your stereotypical like junkie. And I don't know, that moment just kind of broke me, and I did something that I'd never done before, which was reach out to other people in my family and ask for help. And yeah, lucky that I have a great family. Mum had already like looked up rehabs and done all that stuff. And that was kind of the start of my process into treatment. So
had they tried before?
No, they hadn't tried before, but
so they didn't realize, your family didn't realize quite how bad or how far down the line you were?
So, well, sorry, they hadn't like done like an intervention on me to like go to rehab, but mum had definitely had multiple arguments with me about like getting help and stopping and all this sort of stuff. But I remember when that night, when we called the rehab and like I sort of fessed up and told mum the extent of it, she was like, fuck. She's like, she knew that like I was pretty fucked. It was evident. But she didn't realize that, like I was shooting up and that I'd done all this stuff and whatever. And yeah, she was kind of horrified. And now when I talk to her, it's funny, right? She sort of says like, yeah, like it's crazy. Like even as a family member, how you just kind of go into denial as well and tell yourself that things aren't as bad as they are. She's like, but if I reflect on it now, if I looked at you, like you had like one pair of shoes that had holes in them. You like had this paint stained jacket and these like short shorts, and you just used to walk around in that all the time. You always looked disheveled. She's like, I don't know how I didn't know that it was like more worse, so it's really interesting how it all plays out. Yeah.
I had interviewed a lady a couple of weeks ago, Stacey Brown, whose son is currently a heroin addict. And she said this thing, and she's in the US, but she said this thing to me, which was really interesting, I thought, because she said, it's funny because her husband, they got divorced and then they got back together again, and they got divorced. And one of the reasons was because he was an addict. But she said, when you're in it, she said, it's not just the addict who's an addict, it's the whole family. Because if you stand looking from the inside out at the family, you can't see the person with the dysfunction because everybody is so dysfunctional in the family.
That's right. 100% true. 100% true.
And you can't get that perspective, I don't think, when you're living in it.
That's right. That's right. It's kind of like I always relate things back to sport, but like I say that to people all the time. Like it's kind of like if you're playing basketball and you have a bad shooting action, even if you know that you have a bad shooting action, it's typically pretty hard to change it yourself unless you have someone from the outside coming in with a different perspective and like moving your arm into the place that it's meant to be to have a smoother action, because you just get so programmed into like whatever you're doing and the automatic kind of responses and actions that you take. And that's what happens in the family, like you just get stuck in the programs that are running. And the other thing that people have to realize is that, which a lot of people don't realize, and it's amazing talking to people that do like family work with addiction. It's such a big area that needs to be worked on to help actually get better results for people going through addiction, because
and funded.
That's right. Because you're actually in that family situation. You're in crisis, and it does all that stuff, like triggers. It's like it triggers all the stress hormones and all your nervous system and all that sort of stuff. And when you're in that, you go into the flight, fight response and all that sort of stuff, and you can't make rational decisions. And if you stay in that as a family member for a sustained period of time, then you start to develop dysfunctional ways of like processing emotions yourself, dealing with situations. You get stuck in these weird psychological bonds with your family members.
I was going to say relationships change and like mum and dad start fighting over whether one of the parents is doubting what the child is saying, and one parent will try and protect that child and say, no, you're like, that's not, they wouldn't do that. So all relationships are within and around that relationship with that person who is the addict are not muddied. And I don't want to use the word poison because that's very strong, but they really are.
Yeah, 100%. Like, so I see it often. It's really sad, and it's hard to help people to see it and change it early on, because often, unfortunately, it takes like really things to blow up for families to realize, because they just want to fix a loved
person that they think there's got the problem.
That's right.
Yeah.
But often what I see happens is that, before someone does turn their life around, they often wreck a whole bunch of things in their family. The mum and dad break up, or, people don't talk to each other. There's irreparable situation, stuff like that. And it's really sad. And that's why, just on a broader outward perspective, like on policy and public health and stuff like that. That's why, you know, the issue of alcohol and drugs in society is so important, because like, yeah, the down and upstream effects that it has on the overall healthcare system is unbelievable. The amount of money that it costs the taxpayer. So yeah, absolutely.
It was very interesting. You said, I think in the very first sentence of this podcast, you said you used, or you categorized alcohol as a drug.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it is.
It is, absolutely. And I believe that too. And I include sugar in that category as well. But do you, and people will go, oh, sugar's not as bad as cocaine, sugar's not as bad as heroin, it's not as bad as ice.
Yeah.
It has the same effect on the brain, but not to the same degree. Anyway, that's another subject.
But it does. But think about like sugar, like, and you can't blame it all on sugar, don't get me wrong, but like we have a massive problem with obesity in this country, but the Western world, or like all over the world. It's got a big part to play of that is sugar, and the health impacts of that are like just as
widespread
big and widespread as drugs and alcohol. But because of like social stigma, people don't think that.
And that's my point I'm getting to. Was there a point in your drug taking where you went, because I know, and I'm a Czech practitioner and we've spoken about that a little bit, but I have helped coach people who say, for example, are an alcoholic, but would never take drugs because that means they're a drug addict or they're an abuser, or that, because did you have a line of which that you thought, if I cross that line, then I'm in trouble, or did you never have that in your mind?
Oh, like I did.
Like shooting up for me, for example, like when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, like people who shot up, like they were really bad.
They were bad. Yeah. I definitely had that. But that's the kind of weird thing. That's the other thing I've learned about like human psychology, and you can kind of see it in it's a bit of a touchy subject for some people, but you can see it in like, you know, poorer countries, and you're like what humans get used to just becomes like their normal, and humans will like adapt and learn how to live with things, you know. And it's kind of the same thing with drugs and alcohol. When I started, I remember thinking like, yeah, like I would never take ice. I would never smoke ice. I'm only ever going to smoke like pot and drink alcohol and maybe drop a couple of disco biscuits here and there and have a good time. But then you take it, you have this amazing experience. You do it a couple of times because you had a good experience. All of a sudden it becomes more familiar, it becomes more normal. That's the world that you're living in. The people are like that. You just start becoming a reflection of your environment that you surround yourself in. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel that weird to be shooting up. You know what I mean? And it just feels normal, and you kind of lose touch with reality. And actually, I can remember then like sitting on the train, like on the platform, watching people go to work on the train 9 to 5.
And laughing at them?
Yeah. Thinking like, fucking
how
idiots.
Stupid are they?
Yeah, like stuck in the matrix, you know, like I'm never going to do that, square heads, you know, all that sort of stuff. And it's just funny how, humans get used to things. And
how distorted your thinking can get.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever lose that feeling? So I've heard the terminology in the statement that once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. Once you're a drug addict, you're always a drug addict. You're always going to have that. It's not necessarily a fight, but it's always going to be there that you have to be careful around that substance.
Yeah.
Like,
so
do you think about like, and I know from experience because I have taken drugs, and I know that feeling for me, that high, like I can still go back to that exact moment and go straight to that feeling of what that was like. Do you ever lose that?
Yeah. It's a good question. So it's something that I've been talking about a lot more. So I'll give you the quick blow by blow just to put some context around it so people understand it. Is that because like I've learned how important now like words and labels and the associations that you make to those, and how important it is to recognize that and detach from them, and the language and all that stuff. And it's not because like, oh, I'm sensitive about language, but it's the way that I've realized how it programs you individually, but how it also programs like society. So when I got into recovery, which saved my life, I'm not bagging, I'm just kind of saying my experience, but I came into this like methodology of that addiction is a disease, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this concept is kind of founded way back in the day. I couldn't even tell you, like in the 1800s.
Before AA,
yeah. Well, yeah, and kind of like popularized by AA, Dr. Bob in AA and all this kind of stuff, right? That, yeah, addiction is a disease over the time. Like lots of people have, then gone and studied that and, created research papers and all this sort of stuff. And that's like one school of thought around like what addiction is. It's a brain disease. But then there's this whole other school of thought that it isn't. And then there's another school of thought that there's these other things as well. And it's interesting, right? So I came through that when I got clean. It really helped me when I started, because I was like, oh, it's like something medically, chemically that's happening in my brain. And it's helping me to realize that that's not me. And I could kind of disassociate a little bit from that was like a disease or like a medical issue that made me do those bad things. It wasn't me, which helped me initially just to kind of overcome the guilt and shame and all that sort of stuff that had built up and helped me to work through some stuff, but which was a good thing and really helpful for a lot of people. But I found the negative thing over the journey of my recovery is that part of that is that you call yourself like an addict or an alcoholic, and that you're always going to be an addict or an alcoholic, even if you're sober or even if you've got sustained period of change. And even what I said before, like, oh, I'm clean, like,
where's that language come from?
Where's that come from? Like, so if you use drugs, are you dirty? Like that's, like it's this like, whole like association.
Good food, bad food. Yeah.
That's right. And it sounds really weird, but like as you kind of go through that particular recovery community, again, not bagging it, did it for years, saved my life, but you're coming from like a fear-based, self-defeating, I think, kind of core belief system about yourself that you're an addict, and that's sort of like the sum total, and you're powerless over the thoughts and emotions and behaviors that you have, and that addiction is always going to be a part of you. So that's really interesting, because for about 5 years of the period that I've been in recovery, I was like operating out of fear that if I didn't do particular things and go to meetings every day and all this sort of stuff, that if I picked up drugs again, I would relapse and it would go right back to what it was before. And I told myself that story for like 5 years every day, right?
That's such a scary thing.
That's right. And what happened and what I saw from other people, and again, but if you talk to someone that still believes that, they'll swear black and blue that it's like a disease and it's happening, even though the evidence is pretty inconclusive of that. But yeah, like I thought that. And then what I saw other people going through is that after, say, 20 years of clean time or sober and going to meetings, that they would tell themselves these things so that if they did then pick up a drink 20 years later when their life was completely different, things had completely changed, their life would go back to like it was 20 years ago, because they'd been telling themselves that that was what was going to happen for 20 years.
It doesn't sound like recovery, does it?
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's the major shift that I've had in the last kind of 5 years, I guess. And it's been weird because I've uprooted my whole belief system structure about recovery. I've uprooted my belief system structure that kind of saved my life, really, and started to change that and detached a little bit from that community, but still like talking about the issues. And it's been such a strange experience, but I no longer believe, because I've seen the evidence in so many other people, but it's about like the psychological framework that you have for yourself. So yeah, like I no longer believe that if I don't drink, but if I was to have a drink, that I would end up like in the gutter again, shooting up meth, and I think like sometimes you got to be careful of like the subconscious programs that you're telling yourself, because they kind of manifest into reality, not in a hippie trippy way, but just as a matter of kind of like simulation. So it's really interesting to do that. And I guess what I've learned about recovery and changing anything, whether it's a drug and alcohol issue, losing weight, whatever, stop not watching porn, whatever it is that you want to change.
Whatever your addiction is. Yep.
It's, yes, you can do like some outputs in the physical realm that will kind of get you a certain result for a certain period of time. But unless you actually work through your psychology, create a new like emotional process for yourself, transform your identity, change the unconscious belief systems about yourself, understand how your emotional regulation happens, let go of that. Unless you unless you do that and change that, then you're not going to be able to change whatever it is externally long term in your life, because all that stuff underneath is kind of like the fuel to the fire that burns on and rages forever. So it's more about like, and that's what I say to people now when people come in. Like, I often talk to them about like, when we're not trying to help you to stop using drugs and alcohol, we're trying to make you feel more worthwhile, and we're trying to shift your underlying psychological and emotional issues. And when you do that, you remove the fuel to the fire that turns it into a bushfire. So yeah.
Such a great analogy, and so true.
Yeah. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit
Absolutely.
of a
it makes sense to me completely. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. So what do you believe around soul purpose, and what do you have a belief or a thought around what your soul is?
Yeah, good question. So, hey, and this is cool because like I'm into all this stuff, and but I don't sort of like talk about it out loud much. And it's
this
funny.
Is where we need to go, because I think this is the root of many problems.
100%. Like, so I really believe in sort of like that why question, right? And you can go even deeper than that, but if you start, like, even when people come to us and from a drug and alcohol perspective, and they say, like, I want to change my life, I don't want to use drugs and alcohol anymore, it's the first question. I'm like, well, why? And most people don't even know that first why of what they're doing, right? But I believe, just for me, like personally, after asking those questions of why, I think just my sole purpose is to put back more into like life and the universe than I take. Because fundamentally, I think the world is kind of about growth and evolution. So as that transcends through all factors, physically, nature, spiritually, psychologically,
connection.
As the more that you're connecting and growing, the better things become. So that's kind of what I strip it back to. Yeah.
My kind of analogy is that I want to leave people feeling, not necessarily making them happier, but filling them with, or leaving them with a sense of feeling better than they were before they met me, like leaving my glitter.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what part of my soul purpose is, to help other people find their soul purpose, but to help them realize that sometimes we have to go through this shit to realize what that is. And probably you're the only person who can answer this, but do you think that you went through that as your soul purpose, and that nothing could have stopped that process until you evolved to the level where your soul went, okay, you've learned enough now, so go forth and recover, but you have to teach other people about this from the journey that you've gone through?
Yeah, like it's an interesting question, right? Like, the truth is that I'm not sure. Like my kind of theory is that if you think about like, so I'm really into like universal laws, you know,
Yep.
like the
Yep.
stuff that if you just sit there and like watch the world go by, there's like some patterns and there's some trends that you'll like notice continually. One for me is like, evolution or growth that just tends to happen. And like adaptation and things like that. And I sort of think that humans, if you were kind of to split us up into like a pizza or a pie or maybe something more healthy that's in a circle that you cut up into triangles.
Cauliflower pizza.
There we go. I sort of think that like each human, I don't know exactly what they are, but you have like needs in different categories like that relate to connection, like connection to yourself and connection to others, doing something that, like attributes to growth, and one of those, a high purpose. And one of those is like, becoming conscious, right? Like I really think that that's one of them. And what I've found that happens with people is that if you don't make a focused or a conscious effort to address all those different needs, you will naturally kind of find ways in, like the universe will kind of direct you in ways and pull you along into different situations that will help to bring that about, whatever that might be, right?
To show you,
and that's kind of how I feel like has happened to me, like it's in different areas. Like, if I'm not listening, I'll kind of get dragged through some sort of thing that causes some pain. And then
we call that a chaos cycle in the check program. Yep.
There you go. I'll like go, wow, that's kind of what I was meant to discover through here. And that's what needed to change. So it's kind of interesting. Like you just said, chaos, like that interesting, like universal law that seems to happen, the yin and yang, the chaos and the order. Like, I really can see a lot of that stuff playing out for a lot of people, but it's hard to talk to people about because they usually think you're a freak.
I don't think you're a freak, Jack. This is completely on my level. And it takes that higher level of thinking, and we talk about being in the higher mind or thinking with your higher mind rather than your low mind. And that's not to say that the low mind is negative or bad or less than anybody else. It just means to say that your spiritual growth has taken your brain or your mind to a level where you can sit back and the veil has dropped slightly. And I think as you grow through those levels, the veil drops even more every time. Like every time I go through another growth step or another growth process level up, it's kind of like you have to have the chaos cycle before that happens.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that chaos cycle, if you stand still in the middle of that chaos cycle, there is always calm at the middle of it. So like in the middle of a hurricane, it's quiet and it's everything stops in the very middle of that.
Yeah.
So I think life evolves in those chaos cycles around us to take us to those next levels and to that higher level of mind thinking.
100%. And like, I don't know, like it's been, because it's funny, right, for me to talk about all this stuff, because when I started off in this very, like, I guess you would call it analytical,
or linear,
like sort of like very like rational way, or you can't
logical,
even,
like it's left brain.
That's right. Like, and I put in inverted commas, like only kind of trusting in science and, like
wanting evidence.
That's right. So I struggled a lot with like some of these concepts, and it's been such a cool journey for me to evolve through and give myself permission to change my mind and go with what feels okay. And it's been such a super special process. And it's one of the things that I'm the most thankful for, like even just stuff like realizing that when I, like the perception of time, like that's one of the things that really helped me to like kind of kick some of my spirituality and understanding in different things into a different gear. Just like realizing the perception of time, and that if you actually, just through simple like meditation and you quiet yourself and you slow down, that you can actually like alter the amount of time in a day for yourself, because things can slow down or speed up depending what's happening and depending how present you are and all that sort of stuff. And it's so weird, you know what I mean? Like, and I was like, fuck, like days were going super quick yesterday, but I've been doing these few things and connecting and whatever. And now, like, I've done 3 times the amount of things, and the day's like slowing down, and I've still got an hour to watch TV, you know, stuff like that. And it kind of opens you up. Yeah.
Yeah. Opens your mind. Absolutely. How do you bring this into your program? So you run a program that you have funded yourself?
Yeah, that's right. So we've got a program now called Connection-Based Living.
And you say, who is we?
Like, I founded it, but then as well, pretty much at the same time, we consider her a founder too. Her name's Holly Sinclair. And she's a Czechie as well. She's done like what do you call it? Like Czech certified? Is that what they call it?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Holistic lifestyle coaching, or the Czech practitioner side of things. But yeah.
Yeah. So she's definitely done
like HSM1 or something,
or both of those, or something like that. I don't know. Like she's totally into it, and she runs something called the Women's Series. She's awesome. So this kind of side came about, or got increased, like streamlined for me. I was always curious, but it picked up for me when I met my wife 5 years ago. She was, you know, I say before it became kind of trendy and Instagrammable, but she was like studying naturopathy. And at that stage, like, I was curious and opening up a little bit, but I still wasn't all the way there. And she just did some simple stuff to help heal me with like some natural foods and medicines and stuff like that. Like, again, before kombucha was cool, I thought it was the weirdest fucking thing. She used to make it with the SCOBY.
I make kombucha at home as well here. Yeah. I've been making it for over 10 years. Yeah.
There you go. So she gave me that, and within like 30 days, you know, it cleaned me out. I had heaps more energy. I felt great, like all this stuff. And I was like, wow, you know, so like,
why is this not included in my rehab?
That's right.
Recovery. Yeah.
That's right. And some of these things kind of, set me on the path of changing my perception and just all the experience that I had. So yeah, we wanted to create a program that truly like addressed all the different areas that people need to kind of grow in and heal in, so that they can get sustainable long-term change. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that does, I call it kind of like surface level psychological work for people through rehabilitation and stuff like that. But then they'll go down at lunch break and eat a Boston bun, 6 Tim Tams, and, you know, can of Coke or something. And like, yeah, there's just not a lot of awesome solutions out there from my perspective. So what we do with people is that they come in, they do our outpatient program, and basically we kind of basic stuff, I guess you could call it, but we work on mind, body, and spirit. So we help flesh out those unconscious belief systems and kind of like the programming, because that's such a big thing. It's really the biggest thing. I've had people, not because I'm special, it's kind of well-known stuff in other areas, you know, Paul Chek stuff, people like that. But I've had, that's right. Like, I've had people in front of me that had been to like 13 rehabs, and were genuinely trying to like get changes and shifts and stuff like that. And then we've done a session on not calling themselves addicts anymore, focusing on changing their identity, you know,
learning to forgive themselves.
That's right. And like reprogramming some of that stuff. And like literally in like one session,
more than what they had in the other 14 different rehabs.
That's right. And you can see them like, you know, like in their physiology, like they sit up straight, the color comes back in their face. And it's just like, it's amazing to see that. So that's kind of the main thing that we do with them over the 6 weeks. But then Holly also does a microbiome test with them, and helps them to do a gut protocol and reset that so that they can get their biochemistry functioning better.
So they can think clearly,
reduce the impacts of cravings.
Less inflammation in the body. I mean,
that's right.
Those two things alone are massive, and detoxifying.
That's right. Get some like serotonin and dopamine production happening in a natural form again.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff, because that goes into people like wanting to use and all that sort of stuff, even 3 months after down the track, because they've done some of that surface level psychology, but they've done no work on their biochemical responses and stuff like that. So that's a big part of it as well. And then the biggest part is like giving them something that they can take away and put in as like a lifestyle, not just like something that they've done in a 6-week boot camp or whatever it is. So that's what we do with people. And we're seeing like some amazing changes and shifts happening for people. So it's pretty cool.
So just outpatient, no inpatient facility?
No. So we do 6 weeks, and we also do 12 months. So this is the thing, right? There's heaps of myths out there about addiction and addiction recovery. So inpatient rehab, and I've run some of the biggest rehabs in Australia.
Yeah, I know who you worked for before. Yeah.
So there's a misconception about like inpatient rehabs, that if someone has an addiction, they need to go to inpatient rehab. But what it actually does is puts people in like a bubble. And it's artificial, right? And then they learnt these skills, but then when they go out on the outside, it's like they've never done any of this stuff before, because they've never had a chance to practice it in a real life scenario and situation. And often people relapse. You hear it all the time. Sorry, I've been talking to people on podcasts all day. My throat's not holding up. So, but yeah, so that happens all the time, and then they get stuck in this cycle. And like what the actual evidence and data shows from all the research that's done in Australia is that 99.9% of people actually get better results outside of an inpatient rehab. And there's this thing that they call spontaneous remission. And don't quote me, because I don't know how they measure it, but there's actually like a really large amount of people that get this like recovery from spontaneous remission, right? And
that goes in the cancer world as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And that's because addiction and changing this stuff isn't so much about the drugs and creating behaviors and routines. It's about connection, shifting your psychology, healing stuff, which can happen in everyday life and in the normal world. So so don't get me wrong, there is a place for inpatient rehabs, and I think that's more for people that might find themselves homeless or in really bad situations where they need to learn how to live again, you know?
Yeah, and they don't have the support or a support network where they can go back to. Yeah,
that's right. But there's the far majority of people actually don't need that, and they get better results from not going to inpatient rehab.
Yeah. And this is a big thing, has been a big thing for me in my practice. How accessible in terms of money are your programs? Because that is a big barrier for a lot of people who just, if you Google rehab, $30,000 or $40,000, $50,000 to go out to the Morning Peninsula, wherever the places are. And which is, for someone who has a drug addiction or an abuse addiction or an abuse problem, they're not going to be able to go to their family and go, actually, can I have this money to do this?
100%. It's a really tough thing. So I guess we are in the so I do a lot of work with the government, and I'm always banging and advocating and all that sort of stuff, but falls on deaf ears a lot of the time, unfortunately. But we are outside of the government kind of structure for a reason, because we don't want to kind of fall into.
You don't have to comply to certain, not becoming a doctor, like Paul Chek says. He could have become a doctor, could have studied that, but didn't want to fall into that, because then you have to play by certain rules.
Correct.
And sometimes you need to play outside those rules.
Correct. So to kind of make our services as much, I guess, cost effective as they can, the 6-week program, my throat.
Yeah. We're almost done here, Jack.
Just give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to have to get water. Sorry, mate. Sorry.
That's okay. I'll pause you.
I've been doing back-to-backs all day because of the baby, and we've been just trying to get enough content happening.
That's okay.
I can't talk anymore. So, yeah, so that's the reason why we're outside the system, is because, yeah, we don't want to fall into those mandates, like you said, that actually become prohibitive sometimes to what we want to do. So our 6-week program is $4,750, including GST. And then the 12-month program is $21,000, which is like still a lot of money. Don't get me wrong.
But the services need to be paid for, but yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But comparatively to like what you said, which is true, is that it is like pretty, for what you get for the amount of money, it's pretty comparative for the services that we deliver. So yeah, it does make it tough, and it is one of the hardest things and kind of internal conflicts that I always, bang up against is how do we kind of make this work? It kind of reminds me of like that organic food thing, it's like
I was going to say the same analogy. Yeah, because it's easy for me to sit back and say to somebody, you need to change your diet, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I highly recommend that you switch to organic. And the first thing they say is, I can't afford organic.
That's right.
And I say, well, how important is your health to you? Which is quite, and I don't say it anymore to people, but that I have come across that a lot. And I used to say it myself, how much do you value your life? How much do you value your health?
Yeah.
And that is a factor, but sometimes it's not as well.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. 100%. 100%. So, like, I don't know, like the other thing that is frustrating about like government services and stuff as well, which I think needs to change, is that significant amount of that money that gets allocated is all about like crisis, and it's not promoting like wellness and healing and health. It's about
reactionary.
Correct. And it actually fuels this ongoing kind of problems for people, because you treat the symptom when it's at its worst.
But you don't get to the cause.
That's right. That's right. And then people just keep re-engaging with the system. So on a public health level, it's so frustrating. And I was glad to see, I don't know if there'll be any change. They did the budget the other day in the mental health report.
Yeah.
They did mention that you're either too sick to get help or not sick enough, so yeah.
Where can people find you?
So just www.connectionbasedliving.com.au, so that's the treatment program that we run. Or like I'm having a crack in the next year at doing like some self-sustained public health messaging just through doing this, like talking to people, hearing the real stories. So we have Real Drug Talk, which is like that arm of things. So you can find Real Drug Talk. That's where we got most followers and stuff. We're even doing TikTok and all that sort of jazz.
Very cool.
So yeah, you can find Real Drug Talk, or we have all our interviews and different people's stories and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Do you surf?
I did my first ever surfing lesson 3 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. Yeah, I want to try and start.
Where did you do your first lesson?
Torquay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So come up to Urban Surf, because I'm a surf coach.
Awesome.
You had a surf in our lagoon, but I also would love to talk to you about the program that I am a part of. I'm a coach in. It's called the WOW program, Waves of Wellness. I don't know whether you've heard of them.
No, sounds awesome though.
Yeah, I'd like to connect you to them, because I think you would have a good relationship with them.
Oh, that would be awesome, because yeah, I could go off on a tangent, but I always remember it from when I was a kid, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to get into surfing as well and learn, is like when you're out in the water, like you feel amazing when you get out of the water, but yeah, it's like one of those places where you just like connect and kind of forget about things, and it's crazy, isn't it?
It's amazing. Like I learned to be a surf coach and started last year. And one of the first, my shadowing shifts was actually with the launch of the WOW program. And the impact that it had on me was incredible, because I've worked in mental health with my clients and for years and years. And long story short, one of my uncles who lived with us and still lives on my brother's property has schizophrenia. So it's
Yeah.
in our family for a very long time. And I wanted to be proactive in helping people from a health perspective after my first husband passed away from cancer, but also in that mental health area because of my experience as a child around mental health. But when I coached in this WOW program at Urban Surf, I was blown away by the way it ran. And so they ran the first 6-week program in January, February, March of this year. We finished just before Easter, and the second program's running now. But just to see people come there and they know they're coming for a mental, because the program is aimed at people with mental health who want to improve their mental wellness. But to see the changes that happen on the beach or in the surf academy or in outside the water as a result of them being in the water are mind blowing. It's not just about learning to surf and they get up and they're incredible. But the connection and the other things they learn around that as a result of that is mind blowing.
100%. And that's why, sorry, I know we got to go soon, but that's why, it's funny. There's that interesting stat about spontaneous remission. Because I always make the joke, when I'm feeling a bit, cynical or I'm around professors and doctors that think they're
talking statistics.
Talking and sitting in their ivory towers. I always like to make fun. But there's some truth in it, like your hairdresser is a better psychologist than your psychologist, or your personal trainer
yes.
is, it helps you more than the counselor or the mental health professional, because it's there's this whole, it's a thing that people don't realize. Yes, there is strategies and it is about helping people to become conscious and understand their patterns and all that stuff. But to get there, you have to be able to open people up and have all that intangible stuff happen, like empathy, trust, connection, all those things to allow people to drop their guard and actually get to that place. So, if people ever want to do things for themselves, don't feel like I can't do it because I don't have $4,500. I'm never going to get clean. I can't do connection-based living.
Or I can't afford a psychologist and I have to be in the 4 walls of a square room.
That's right.
It can happen outside that.
Get out there in nature, talk to your mates, all that sort of stuff that will help more than you think. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today, Jack, with me.
No worries. Appreciate it.